Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted and not before time that we've welcomed Yuval Wagner and Michal Rimon from AXS Israel. You guys are legendary. We love the work that AXS Israel is doing. It's really revolutionary, and generally the Israeli accessibility and tech scene is super interesting. So really glad to have you here. We've been talking infrequently over the last couple of years, but I've been tracking what you've been doing. So please, tell us about this. Tell our audience about the amazing stuff you're doing. And Yuval, if you'd like to start, because you're the founder and of course have the backstory here.
Well, if I share all the story, we're not going to have enough time for the core of the information. But shortly, I was a son of a father with disability. I myself was wounded when I was serving as a pilot at a crash. And luckily stayed alive, and I'm quadriplegic, neck down, paralyzed, confined to a wheelchair. By the way, I'm bald, a reddish face, roundish face, and wearing a yellow polo. And my experiencing life in an totally inaccessible country, and you have to understand, nothing is accessible. No sidewalks, no stores, no restaurant, no cinemas, no parks. Nothing is accessibly. And we're talking about the urbanic environment. We're not talking about technology. We're not talking about services. That felt like, on top of dealing with my injury, and on top of dealing psychology with my being a person with disability, on top of dealing how I am with the public, I felt that I got a bonus, which is a house arrest. And that led me one day to take an action, which was a very simple one, to write a letter to the President of Israel. Listen, Mr. President, we have a problem here. Israel is not accessible. And I urge you and call you to make it accessible. And 2 days later, that was 21 years ago, and I wrote it in a regular letter, not in an email. And 2 days later, I get a personal telephone from the Israeli president.
Wow.
And is asking me about my flight accident, because he was an Israeli pilot too. And then he asked me, what the word? I don't know I never heard about the word accessibility. So those days, the term accessibility was not used at all. It was not known. And then he said to me one sentence that is still in act, and it became our mission target of Access Israel in the state until today. Yuval, I want you to make Israel accessible for all disabilities and in all areas of life. And we're going to launch Access Israel in 6 months in the President's house. End of call. And since then, we established Access Israel, and we're working very hardly on the same mission, making Israel accessible for all disabilities in all areas of life. And as you guys know, and probably all the listeners know, accessibility is all the time changing. So work will never end, but we are trying to do our best to make Israel accessible by the order and the mission that is defined by our Israeli President, Ezer Weizmann.
That is an amazing story. That is an amazing story. Shows what one person can do. So congratulations.
He was known for his charismatically, to be very charismatic and very, known to give those orders.
But I will close the story and say that last year, before COVID, a year and a half ago, we celebrated 20 years for Access Israel. And we had a ceremony at the presidential residence in Jerusalem with President Reuven Rivlin. And in a way, it's amazing to see the progress that Israel has gone through since Access Israel stepped in. And it's something that we presented to the president, and it was a closure, not to close things, because we still have a lot of work coming, but definitely to hold on a second, look back and say, okay, we're on the right track.
Yeah. And Michal, how did you get involved? I'm sorry, Neil,
No, go for it.
Yeah.
14 years ago, I was a lawyer. I used to be the spokesperson for the Israeli mission to the UN. I was in high tech, and I wanted to do something good. And I came to Access Israel, met with Yuval. And the truth is, I came only for 2 years, just to understand what an NGO is all about, and then go and create my own baby. And luckily, we are very much alike and very different at the same time. Basically, Yuval gave me the opportunity, Yuval and Rani gave me the opportunity to take Access Israel in a direction that I wanted. So it became a mutual baby, not just a vision of that Yuval had 21 years ago. And we got into really education and training, which is something that I am a true believer in. And I've been in Access Israel 14 years. And the amazing thing, and I'm sure that people who are listening in and are in the business of accessibility can relate to what I'm going to say. I think it's a great honor and privilege to deal with this subject, because it's a subject that you go out in the morning, look out, and you see the change happening in front of your eyes. One day is more accessible than the previous one, and it's a great privilege to do that.
I would add to that one sentence that Michal said she wants, to lay down. She wants 4-day work, finishing at 4 o'clock. So what happened is she's working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And we still have a lot to do. So she's superpower, super CEO, and we are very fortunate and lucky to have Michal leading us.
So it's funny how we all have similar stories in this respect. I started with 3 weeks work for a small company, just doing a little bit of work on the side for a little company in Cambridge doing speech recognition systems. I stayed there for nearly 10 years and have been playing with assistive tech for over 20 now. And you're right, it's not a 9 to 5 or an 8 to 4 job. It's a vocation, and we all live and breathe it. And yeah, it is, I think, and I've had this conversation 3 or 4 times today, and I've had the privilege of speaking with, some of our mutual circle. So Stefan from the ILO, people from the European Commission, and we're all saying, actually, it feels like things are moving, like really moving right now. And even within my own organization, where, we've made progress over the 10 years that I've been there, that's much more rapid now. There's, lots more people are engaged. You are looking at stuff, and it's not moving. I used to talk about accessibility being like plate tectonics, right? In that, essentially, you're building up all of this pressure. It feels like nothing's happening, but underneath there's all this pressure, and suddenly you have an earthquake, and something big happens, and then you have a few aftershocks, and then it goes back to stillness and nothing as you build up the pressure. Well, now it feels more like there's a constant cadence of improvements, and I think that's really, really encouraging, and we're building that ecosystem, which is why I'm loving talking to you today and finding out more about what's going on in Israel, because you've gone, you've really put that on warp speed, because you've gone from nothing, as Yuval said, to something that is, you're really, leading in terms of tech, and you're engaging around the world. So how does the sort of Israeli culture of tech impact on sort of disability, accessibility, innovation?
Well, it's I think the term today that is very, everyone is talking about is innovations. Innovation in your organization, innovation where how you work and what you do, and to invent yourself every day. And I think from the beginning we like Michal said that we like a commando team. We were in the beginning very small, but we did a lot very fast and very good. So it was all the time this energy of like a startup. It's like really a lot of motivation, a lot of drive, doing things, engaging every challenge. People saying, why do you do so much work? Because we can say no, and we're proud that we can say no. We're not going to say no if someone says, listen, they have a new problem that we have to deal. We're too busy. We have our main thing. No, we're not going to do that. No, we do it also. So it's really, you have to be a little crazy to, and every few years we have consultancy with those, strategic teams that consult to us what to do the next few years. And they go, they don't believe what they see. They always say, no, narrow it down, do much less, do only the things, the 1, 2, 3 things you on your top priority. No, we can't do it. It's in our DNA to make, not to leave anything back. And it's really a little crazy. It's no model like that. But we tried saying that we had to do things in a professional way. So the first lesson that we learned is called awareness first, or to understand the power of awarenesses. If you have a great idea, and we all have the same ideas of promoting and implementing accessibility and developing accessibility, but if we are not able to make awareness so people will understand the importance of the case, they're not going to engage, they're not going to help us, they're not going to implement it. So I remember our first project, big project, that made a giant change in Israel before we even have any regulation, any laws, and until today it's developing, and now we are talking about exporting it all over the globe, which is a model how to make a business accessible. And we said, how when we don't have any laws, how do you convince a chairman of a big bank chain or big supermarket chain or any other big company, how do you convince them to make their organization or their business fully accessible? We had the knowledge of everything, of what to do in the stores and how to train the service givers and how to make the website accessible and how to make the call center accessible and how to make the information accessible and events accessible. We knew how to make things accessible. But how do you convince the CEO to put money and implementing our demands of accessibility? So we knew two things. One, we have to understand the business case and telling them, the 18% people with disabilities, we all know the business case, but we told him also the truth. He's not going to see 18% growth because in the 18%, they have a smaller group that are accessibility for them is core or critical. So we told them the true business case, but also we said it would be great for your business social responsibility or social image. And so we invented this badge, accessibility badge. So until today, a business that makes all its organization accessible, all its B2C activities and services accessible. Today we do it also inside, we do also procurement and the legal department and all, we make totally really organization accessible. At the end of the day, it gets its badge, and then we get what we call the win-win-win situation. The business gets its own win, the people with disability clients get their win, and Access Israel get this win. So to close this, we started with awareness, then we had a model that brings the result, by the way, very quickly and very efficiently, because we simplified everything. And thirdly, we got the advertising to close it, and to make it relevant for today. When we joined the valuable 500 of our great friend Caroline, when we were asked to bring Israeli companies, it was not just to bring companies that are stating that they want to do stuff. They already done it. Okay, so so we are in a very unique stage that when we have started the laws and regulations, we already had companies, leading companies, that done it already.
So, I will add to that, Yuval, with your permission, that I think that the key for success was not coming from a position of begging. I think that until Access Israel started operating in Israel, the situation, the reality was that organizations of people with disabilities came and asked to be recognized, asked for in a way it could come and be understood as begging. And we came and said, guys, you're not doing us a favor. This is something that is good for all. And now let's see if you want to join the revolution. And I think that changing the DNA, and this is what the model is doing, changing the DNA of the organization is what makes sure it's not just checking the box, but it's making a long-term change.
And I will also say that I saw Michal in New York City at the UN. And so I represent, of course, the United States, the big, gigantic United States. And I said, Michal, this is a race and I'm going to try to beat you. You can't bring more company. Well, she beat me so bad because actually I believe Access Israel brought more corporations to the valuable 500 than any other partner. And so
I think us and Japan brought 100. So
right, which is, and you beat me.
It's crazy.
It. So, but I want to turn it over, but congratulations on that. That was amazing. And let me turn it over to Antonio. I know he has a comment.
No, following on Yuval's comment, we often observe that in the United States, there's often a culture of litigation and enforcement. In Europe, in countries like Norway, we have a culture of education in terms of business and society. Can you clarify to our audience what is the scenario in Israel?
Definitely. Actually, it's in the beginning, I changed my mind. Because when we started, I said, we don't need any laws, we don't need any regulations. Let's just take our model and let it spread by itself. But anyway, in Israel, they started another organization, have made the Israeli accessibility, equal rights accessibility laws. And that before, actually the same time that we were founded. So then we were asked, why don't you legislate the accessibility laws in Israel? And so we've done that, and we found a very great strength of the laws. And over here, I would say the way it works. In Israel, we have the law, we have regulations, and we have standards. It's pretty much like other systems around the world. But what's unique about accessibility laws in Israel, that it's not about only public services or government services, it's about everything. Government, municipalities, businesses, and NGOs. Everyone has to be accessible. They have some exempts if you don't have money or if they have other barriers. So it's very fair. It's not, it's not drastic on one hand. If you have problems, they have some procedures how to, be exempt of some of the things. But what's another interesting stuff is that you can make a lawsuit against any entity that is not complying with the law. So this became a very strong tool. You have to do what you have to do. Another interesting, very unique thing is every organization with more than 25 employees must appoint an employee that will be the accessibility director, both inside, promoting accessibility inside, but also, of course, being the point of contact with the customers. Another thing, all websites in Israel and applications and automatic machines have to be accessible day one. Another very, very unique thing is, and I will let Michal share because that's her baby and she brought it to the world, is training employees how to give accessible service, but in an experiential way. Michal, please elaborate on this uniqueness.
Yeah. Because it's I think that here is really something very unique in Israel. We are the only country in the world, to our knowledge, that by law, every service provider has to go through training annually on accessible service. I think in Ireland, when I was there, I was told that the public servants have to do that. But here in Israel, it's everyone. You go to a coffee shop, they have to, the waiter has to go through training, etc. So it's every service provider every year, and at least once to go through experiential. And this is something that we have been doing before the legislation kicked in. And I was very proud that the legislation basically adopted it. The model of, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. We actually, this is really something that we are very proud of. Our 4 pillars, the Access Israel 4 pillars, which are the base of the training. We combine the knowledge, the experiences, crazy, innovative ways of taking something that is not sexy and making people stand in line and want to do it, bringing opportunities for direct contact between people with disabilities and without disabilities, so you can see the person behind the disability, and wrapping this up with tools on how to make a difference, how to change it, whether you're a CEO of a bank or a first grader in going to school for the first time. So this training model is a unique aspect of Israeli law.
Another last thing that is very, very special and very important for people with disabilities is that also every organization must have must to advertise all its accessibility services that are provided in the website and in the call centers. So me as a person with disability, when let's say I want to go to an hotel that I never been there, and it's so important for me to understand in advance the accessibility for me, or if Neil wants to come and wants to know how it's accessible for vision disabilities, the information should be up there in Hebrew and in English. And if it's not, well, you can sue it. So I think at the end, closing this question about the legal aspect of accessibility in Israel, and if I started as someone that believed that we don't need it, at the end of the day, I believe that you have to work on both ways. There are those that you can convince them on the business case and the social case of accessibility, and they will do it because they're a believer. But there are so many that if you don't have those laws, they will never do it. So you have to use those 2 tools to actually make your country. And I want to add another, thought about it. At the end of the day, we as people with disabilities live our lives. And life is not one thing, it's everything. And the real goal, I know it's, it sounds crazy, but the real goal is not here and there and there and there and here. It's everything. everything must be accessible because we need to be able to do everything. So to do everything, you need to engage in various ways to make it happen.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And yeah, I mean, we don't want just to be able to participate in part of society. We want to engage fully in every aspect of it, and that requires accessibility to be a part of everything that we do. So I mean,
Neil, 1 second, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to
You're
say,
welcome.
Because, some of us are coming, Deborah coming from a small country called USA, but some of us are from smaller countries. And, another unique thing about Israel, because of the laws, accessibility is engaged everywhere, in small towns and in large towns, from north to east, to south, and east to west. So, and it's important because sometimes you go to large, to countries, and the main cities, the large cities are, very progressed and they're doing stuff, but you go 20 minutes aside and nothing is accessible, okay?
Yeah.
So Neil, you know that from, so that's another thing that we never talk about because we usually visit the big cities. But when you go to the smaller cities, the peripheral cities, we have to make sure that those are accessible too.
I agree, and I think that as we use more and more technology, there is this parallel and joined up effect with the connectivity as well. And Deborah can tell you about how good the Wi-Fi is in the countryside of the United States, right? Shaking her head now, but essentially, and we're engaged with Africa on a number of initiatives looking at assistive tech in Africa, and actually, just the cost of data and access to data means that you have to have an entirely different approach to how you're doing assistive tech, because you can't take the off-the-shelf Microsoft and Google tools because you can't afford to, because either you don't have the connectivity or you can't afford the connectivity. So then it changes how you do it. So the approach that you've got, as a small nation is great because it's everywhere. Obviously, each country has different stages in their economic development. So how we align our accessibility programs also has to be different. Deborah, I know you had a question.
First of all, Deborah always has questions.
I got my mute off. Go ahead.
Deborah always have questions. So
I always have questions. Yeah, we're very, well, I would say all three of us on AXSChat, we do this because we're so curious. But we are the United States. And so all of the states are small countries, really. I mean, that we're the United States. And just, following on what Neil said, there's 330 million Americans and 163 million Americans do not have access to high-speed internet, which is shameful. Wow. I also want to make a comment based on what you said, Yuval, when you're talking about the big cities being accessible. Sadly, DC, our capital of the United States, is not accessible. I am mortified when guests come and it's terrible. You've been to DC, it's terrible. And so I wish other countries would follow the lead. And I hope that people don't say, well, Israel's a small country, that's why because that's ridiculous, because there are a lot of small countries. Once again, the US is a bunch of small countries, but how do we get other countries to follow your lead? Because you really, really are leading. And I would assume some of it is why you make so many efforts with your community to make sure it's global. But, what can we do to follow your lead? And one more comment, thank y'all for making a carrot and the stick approach. In the States, as Antonio said, we got our big stick out, but we have caused a lot of friction between the community and everybody else, because they feel like, the community people with disabilities are so mean because we're suing them. Well, then become accessible. But anyway.
So I I will, with your permission, Yuval, I will talk to you a little bit about this international. What about this community and how do we duplicate it? So I think that, yeah.
I want to build up before I want to give like,
Go ahead.
To bridge your point. Because before going international, one of the things that I learned that it's not about accessism. Okay, and it's something that you have to understand, and it's very important. Because if Access Israel was wanting to control everything and do everything yourself, we will never get the same results. The moment we understood that, and today in Israel, we have, I think, more than around 1,500 accessibility consultants and firms. So Access Israel is always trying to do the next new things or the next, development of accessibility. But the idea is, how do we make as many people like us, crazy like us, wanted to make accessibility? Because the more the better. Because if each one is doing more and more things, the country is becoming more and more accessible. So saying that, when we learned this in Israel, the same case is going international. And Michal, go here. That's
okay, so yeah, basically about 8 years ago, I went to my first international conference. It was Zero Project, a great place to start, in Vienna, at the UN building in Vienna. And I really came to learn, and I did. I learned amazing things. And I think the most amazing thing that Zero Project taught me is that it doesn't matter if you're $1 billion company or you're, there was a Malaysian guy, I think, that has a little Nokia phone that just took a video of him pulling his wheelchair with a rope. So when there's an earthquake, he can evacuate himself easily. And I mean, any innovation, it doesn't matter how much money you have behind it, as long as you're innovative and it's duplicable and sustainable, they wanted to share it. But another thing that I found out during that conference is that I too have stuff to share. It's not just coming and learning from, but it's sharing with. And I think that one of the things that, as Yuval said, we learned in Access Israel, and I was always approached and said, and people asked me, how come you have like 10 minutes at the UN to speak and you mentioned 2 Israeli organizations that are not you? Why do you do that? And the reason is, it's not about me. It's not about Access Israel. We are here to achieve something. And if somebody else is doing a great job, I want to put the spotlight on them and make sure everybody sees it, because maybe that is exactly the information that they want to see. And this is the basic of our international community that we are so proud to have established. Basically, what we do is, we started off with a conference, annual conference. We called it the International Access Israel Conference when we had 5 international guests. We were very proud of that internationality. And the amazing thing is that it just expanded every single year. And I think that the key is that we're not, conferences are great and we go to conferences and learn and share, but we understood that we don't want a conference, another conference. We want a connection. We want to make sure that a month or half a year after the conference, if I want to ask something, I can just WhatsApp and say, hey, Deborah, I need help. And Deborah, who will remember me fondly and remember the good time we're doing, will say, I'm here for you. What do you need? And this is the idea. The glue, and we were referred to as Access Israel is only a glue, and I'm very proud to be a glue, bringing people together, experts from all over the world, and really, enabling everybody to both learn and share. And we're very proud to do that. And we're looking forward. I think COVID-19 was a great opportunity because it's a lemon, but we turned it into a lemonade with the international and global sharing. And I think that if we started, Neil, by saying that things are really starting to move very fast in a way, I think this is part of it, because we are borderless, and joining hands is what will make us strong.
Yeah, I fully agree. And we have this amazing community, and the whole point of AXSChat is around sharing and community. So thank you for being part of it. I also need to thank Barclays Access, MyClearText, and Microlink for continuing to support us to keep these communities alive. I'm really looking forward to you taking part in our discussions on social media, not just this Tuesday, but continuing. So thank you very much again. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yuval.
Thank you very much.
Next episode, we'll talk again.